Ron Johnson is Minnesota sports. One-of-a-kind opinions, big-name guests, the teams you care about every day. It's the Ron Johnson Show, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Ron Johnson Show. I'm your host, Ron Johnson. On today's episode of the Ron Johnson Show, I'm super excited. We got Ryan Clark, former 13-year NFL vet, Super Bowl champion Ryan Clark, ESPN's Ryan Clark. Make sure you stick around for that interview. I know he's going to be fire. We also are going to talk NFL draft. We're going to talk a little Wild later in the Daily 3 as well, and some of the other topics. It is the Wild playoff day. They are headed to the playoffs. They did win home ice advantage. The Twins, they're still playing. The Timberwolves, unfortunately, they're done. But we are, of course, going to always talk about what's next for the Timberwolves with D'Angelo Russell. But let's jump into this with the first round draft pick of the Minnesota Vikings is, and everybody knows it was Lewis Cine out of Georgia. Now, watching the fans, first of all, at US Bank Stadium, I was at the draft party, extremely weird. And as I bring Sam Ekstrom in, my producer, Sam, the draft party, we've talked about this. Everybody's talked about this. People shown the reaction. It wasn't the best reaction when they traded back 20 picks in the first round. Not only that, and because of who they traded with, somebody within their division. In your opinion, do you think trading, because I said trading back in every mock I did on our show in the trade, I traded back. I didn't trade back far enough, clearly. What is your opinion on the trade back?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at the whole of the parts, right? Because it wasn't just one trade back, it's two trade backs. So the deal with Detroit, you passed over a lot of talent in those 20 picks. I mean, there are a lot of really good players that went off the board from 12 to 32. And you'll look down the road at all of that talent that you might have let slip through your fingers. But on the same token, it is Detroit. And Detroit's not necessarily competitive yet. They're not really your rival in this division. It's harder to take that as seriously as that Packers trade back, where Green Bay wants a weapon for Aaron Rodgers, and they have a legitimate weakness at wide receiver going into this draft. So you allow them to come up to 34 and get a receiver that they absolutely wanted and who looks like he's going to be pretty good in the NFL, and you did help him out. Now, I know Kwesi Adofo-Mensah circled back and said, well, they were probably going to make a deal anyway. Maybe that's true, but they made it with you. They made it with the Vikings. So the Vikings will always be connected to Christian Watson twice a year. We get to write the articles about Christian Watson, the one the Packers traded up for. And we'll get to write the articles about Jameson Williams too with the Lions. So 4 games a year, the Vikings will have to look at the receiver that they allowed that team to jump up and draft.
Yeah, and so some of those names, like you said, but between 12 and 32, I don't think everyone is going to be somebody we can look at and moan and groan, but it's going to happen because that's what Vikings fans do. Jameson Williams, if he ends up being great out of Alabama, people are going to be like, man, we should have just took him and partnered him with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen in that first year. Jordan Davis, the big D tackle. He could play starting his 3-4 defense. Kyle Hamilton. We're going to have a direct impact conversation all the time about the Ravens, Kyle Hamilton, and the Vikings, Lewis Cine. Which was the better pick? You got Johan Dotson out of Penn State, the receiver. If you drop down, Kenny Pickett, some of those. Now, I did say try to trade with the Steelers. We knew the Steelers wanted a quarterback. If they traded up, they would have went and got Kenny Pickett. I would have just reached out to see what they'd be willing to do because they really want their quarterback. You could scare them in thinking like, hey, I know you guys want a quarterback. I do hear X. Could have been you could have said the Texans. The Texans are asking us for our pick, but we know we'd rather get it from you because we want the second-round pick, if that worked. Kenny Pickett, I don't think that's going to matter to us. Trent McDuffie, a cornerback, that's going to matter. The one I thought too, Kaiir Elam, because he's the corner taken after where I thought the Vikings should have dropped down to, which was 20. Now, of course, Trent McDuffie went after, so we can look at both. But Kaiir Elam, we're going to actually see him with the Buffalo Bills this year. So that'll be another one. He interviewed well. I like the fact that he had notes and he talked about that stuff. Like, here's some mistakes I made. Here's some ways I could have got better. So you got Kaiir Elam. You got Tyler Linderbaum. He could have been the staple at center for the Vikings if they had decided to just go get their guy and they moved on from Garrett Bradbury. So we'll look at him and, what happens with him again with the Ravens. You look at Lamar Jackson. Is this going to be his staple? You got an offensive guard in Cole Strange that people are saying that the New England Patriots had the worst draft ever. So we'll see what he ends up being. He's kind of a tackle and a guard. He's a swing guy. But if he comes out and starts and becomes a Pro Bowler for the Patriots, everybody, of course, is going to say, unless the Vikings, Ed Ingram, can come in and start this year at guard and do well, that's going to be another one that are going to make people want to look at it. Some of these other ones, Dexter Hill from Michigan, he was a safety taken right before Lewis Cine. It's funny, everybody's talking about Lewis Cine versus Kyle Hamilton. Nobody's talking about Daxton Hill out of Michigan. And so I like the thought of what the Vikings did. You went out and got a hitter. You went out and got a guy to partner with Harrison Smith. I liked it. I didn't mind it. I do think they could have got more to drop back 20 picks with the Lions and give the Lions that big of a jump up. Maybe the moment was too big. It was a quick, like, hey, we got to get this done. Let's see what we can get. If that seemed like the best deal for what they wanted, fine. They end up trading up. Nobody talked about that when they traded up to go get a guy they wanted. Everybody talked about the trade down. But you get Andrew Booth. He, in my opinion, I know that was another guy everybody talked about. The injuries, I think, for him changed it. Derek Stingley was to overcome his injuries, but you got Andrew Booth who, did not. But he said he's been hurt. He felt like his entire college career, which I don't know if I would have said that. But he does feel healthy now. And so I think that's a guy that's going to come in and compete and probably start. You look at second round picks for the Vikings. They've fared pretty well. Brian O'Neill and Dalvin Cook to name the first early two that I can think of, the latest. And I think that he can come in and be that guy. I think he can come in and play in this defense. Yeah, he's confident. He's at a school that has a coach that coaches like an NFL team. But Sam, I mean, the fans, how like what would I don't understand like what so let's say this. Let's put you in a DeLorean. You're Michael J. Fox. What could you go back and do to make the fans happy? Is it just going ahead and drafting somebody like Jamison Williams at 12? Because the injury is going to come up. People are going to be like, well, he's not even ready to play this year. Or, well, he says he is now. He says he's going to be ready for the opening training camp. I don't know. Maybe he is. He's a freak of nature like Adrian Peterson. And he's young. But what time machine, what could you have done to make these fans happy?
I think fans are pretty enamored with the sexy positions. So when you make trade backs and those teams take wide receivers, good wide receivers with those picks, it changes the narrative, right? I don't know if the Vikings can control that. I don't know if they can exactly know who a team is going to take. Maybe they had a hunch that the Packers were going wide receiver. Not sure about the Lions. But if the Lions move up and take Kenyon Green, like a guard, I don't think anybody's upset. I really don't. I think it's more about the player that those teams took. And I don't know if the Vikings are responsible, to control what those teams do. Right. I think that, certainly the Vikings walk out of this draft with a player in Cine who may not be a starter right away, but he's a talented player. Booth, you think he might start? I think he could be kind of the utility corner for a little bit while he figures things out. I mean, I don't know if they necessarily got a lot of, sexy positions like wide receiver. They didn't draft a quarterback. A lot of people wanted Malik Willis. But what they did do is they added a lot of defensive talent for down the road. And they've had a void of young, strong defensive talent now for a while. So I think the early draft approach is actually pretty good. But I think the fans, they look at who you could have had, who your rivals took instead, and they say, man, they didn't get this offense anything. And offense is what sells in this league. And the Vikings didn't really do a lot of that.
Yeah. And so when you look at this draft, my favorite pick is going to have to be one. Andrew Booth is one. And I guess I don't have one. I can't just do one. I'm three. I like three. Andrew Booth is one. Brian Asamoah is two. And then my third is going to be a Caleb Evans out of Missouri. The reason for it is the issue everybody talked about was cornerback. Well, what did they go do? Drafted two good cornerbacks. They also drafted a safety. They also drafted a guy in Brian Asamoah at linebacker. When you think about sub packages, you're not going to leave Eric Kendricks and Jordan Hicks in the game in some passing situations, but you can bring in Brian Asamoah. Eric becomes your drop back guy, or Asamoah does. He can move. He's fast. He's long. Sorry, he's not long. He's fast. 6 feet, 226 pounds. He reminds me of Cato June. And I reached out to Cato June, 7-year NFL vet, 2005 Pro Bowler, he was in our class as well, 2002 with myself and Ryan Clark. And I reached out to Cato June, who's now the linebackers coach for the Colts. He had said they were looking at Asamoah. They were gonna possibly pick him because he liked him. He reminded him of himself. He said he calls him slim because he is only 226 at linebacker, but he said he can run. Like he said, he can run, he can fly, he's instinctive. And I think that's going to be the key for this Vikings team. When you look at a guy that's fast, instinctive, can hunt down quarterbacks, his blitzing, he's very quick. He disguises it well. If he's not the first blitzer and he's that delayed linebacker blitz, he can spy quarterbacks. You look at running quarterbacks that the Vikings are going to face on third down this year. You got Dak Prescott, you got Daniel Jones, you got Kyler Murray. And I wouldn't say Daniel Jones is a runner, but he can run. Kyler Murray, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers can hurt you with his legs. Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen has hurt the Vikings with his legs. Not a traditional, we call him a runner, but he has hurt the Vikings with his legs. And then Taysom Hill. Who knows what the New Orleans Saints are going to do with him? But when he's in the game, you do need somebody to spy him because he runs. Like he's a running back, quarterback, receiver. I don't know what he is. He's a Swiss Army knife. And so when you put a guy in the game that runs like Asamoah does, 5'4", 5'6" was his 40, but he plays. They put him on the catapult machine. He plays at 4.4 speed. And so what that means is that he can help alleviate some of those big quarterback scrambles. When you watch him run sideline to sideline, it's like a lion chasing a gazelle. And so I like that pick as well. Sam, who was your favorite pick?
I think it's probably a Caleb Evans for the type of player he is and the value that you get in the fourth round for, a corner that I feel like has traits of a first round or second round kind of guy. Like the measurables are there. The size is excellent. There weren't a lot of big, tall corners in this draft, I felt like, and he was one of them, 6'2". So for where you got him, day 3 of the draft, and what his skills seem to indicate he can do, it feels like a really good steal in that fourth round. I do have my concerns about Booth from a health standpoint because, while he might say he feels good now, now's the offseason. He's had injuries every single year, and that's the red flag. That's why he wasn't a first-round pick. So that could also be an incredible steal. If you get a guy that was bound for the first round, fell because of injuries, and then stays healthy, then you're golden. That's brilliant. But it is a concern for me. I think Evans, though, at that position, to get a good corner that late in the draft seems really quality to me.
But up next, we got Ryan Clark. I mean, this is what everybody's been waiting for. This is what I've been waiting for. So happy we were able to get him. I know he's busy, but we got Ryan Clark coming up on the Ron Johnson show, so stick around for that. Make sure to check out our other daily show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's a Superior Sports Talk with KARE 11 Sports Director Reggie Wilson and Luke Inman. Here, Reggie and Luke go back and forth about the latest Minnesota sports 5 days a week. Find it on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. We have guest Ryan Clark, former Pittsburgh Steeler, Washington football team. I don't know if he's going to go with the Commanders. Are you, let's start off with there. Are you going to wear Commanders t-shirts? Like if they send you some stuff, are you rocking the Commanders gear?
No, what's crazy, man, is I don't really wear any former team stuff to be honest. I don't wear jerseys, in that way. Even when I go to my son's games, I just wear Lululemon or DB Precision. I'm not like one of those people. And the Washington Commanders really don't invite me back for anything. Not that I'd go, to be honest, but, I don't really have that connection to a city. I don't really have that connection to an organization like that. With Pittsburgh, it was the people. It's the family. You still love the Rooney family, which they were good to me both on and off the field. Obviously, Coach Tomlin is still there. I remember the people in the building so well. They treated they treated me well. We all became close, and the organization treated them well. So I think Pittsburgh would be obviously I want a ton there. Pittsburgh would be the place that I'm closest to. But even then, if they sent me a jersey, I probably wouldn't wear it either unless it had Troy Polamalu or one of my other teammates' name on it.
Yeah, and Ryan, like I felt a connection to Ryan. One, the 2002 draft class. I think we had in my opinion, I think we had one of the best draft classes. You look at Julius Peppers, you look at Roy Williams, you look at Ed Reed.
Mm-hmm.
When everybody talks about the safety draft class of 2022, I think I'm not saying I'm one of the few, but not a lot of people realize Ryan Clark was in that class. I personally crossed paths with you because you were leaving Washington and I was coming, and I only stayed there a couple months. I ended up getting cut, but that's how I started to know about who Ryan Clark was from guys like Sean Taylor, from Santana Moss. And then as we got older now, I've watched you, I've admired what you've done. You motivate me to do more. And so my question to you, Ryan, is looking at that draft class, and you look at those safeties and you probably, you have more Super Bowls than Roy Williams. What do you say to an undrafted player right now coming out when you look at, other guys going ahead of them, and what are they going to have to do to stay on the team?
Well, what's so crazy is normally after every draft, I have 2 or 3 conversations like right after the draft with people who are undrafted.
Yep.
Whether it's they DM me in Twitter because I follow them because they play my position or they've known me throughout their career. And now some of those people are the few people that realize I was undrafted. Because a lot of times because you play for a long time, because you're on TV, people don't necessarily know. And I think I try to always tell them what my mindset was. And at 22, I didn't understand this was my mindset, but looking back on it, I got it. I always believed I belonged. And inversely, I always behaved as if they felt like I didn't. That was my thought process. Anytime if you're on the field with a RonJohnson, who was drafted, if you're playing against a Jeremy Shockey, who was the first round draft pick of my draft, you had to step on the field and stand across from those people as if you belonged out there, as if you did start 39 games at LSU, as if you were all SEC. And you had to step on the field that way, but you also had to know that every day people didn't believe you belonged there because they thought you belonged there. One of these 32 teams and one of these 7 rounds would have drafted you. And so every day when you're sitting in the meeting and you outplay the draft pick, but no one says anything about your interceptions, no one says anything about you lining people up, no one says anything about your tackles or filling the lane, and then they do one thing and everybody in the room goes crazy, you got to realize that's because they don't think you belong there. And so every day was an interview for me. Every day I had to go out and prove it. And I felt that way for 13 years. I remember when I got to Washington, and I was, old as dinosaur, pissed at that time. They were trying to put this plan in for me to sit out practices in camp. And I was like, I ain't sitting out no practices. I was like, I don't need a break. And that was just my mindset because I still felt like then I had to prove it, even though by that point I had proven to myself and to everyone else I belonged.
You know what? And you were leaving the Giants, now that I think about it, going to the Steelers, right?
No, yeah, I went Giants to Washington.
And then Washington to Pittsburgh. Yeah. Okay. All right. I knew it was something else in there because I'm like, I knew there was a New York connection in there somehow.
Yep.
And so, Ryan, looking at this draft class, and I've equated this to the Ed Reed versus Roy Williams. You look at Kyle Hamilton versus Lewis Cine, and everybody's questioning where somebody's drafted. Ed Reed was drafted after Roy Williams. Of course, Roy had all the highlights. He had all the stuff, and then Ed had all the corners. He had the big class out of Miami that year. I think one of the, the most first rounders for one team or something like that. So when you look at Kyle Hamilton versus Lewis Cine coming to the Vikings, what are the Vikings getting in the Lewis Cine?
I think the Vikings, they get a player that from a run and hit standpoint is the best safety in this draft. I do believe Kyle had more ball production, right? Or in what disruptions, and you know what that is. That's interceptions. Yeah. That's turning the football over. I think Kyle had probably more wow plays than Lewis Cine. But I still believe Lewis has more range. It doesn't mean he tracks the ball better or gets to the ball better. He has more range. He's a faster, more explosive player than Kyle is. We also have to keep this in mind, Ron. And I am Minnesota. I am not saying that Lewis Cine will be a better pro than Kyle Hamilton. Don't y'all start that after Ron plays this interview. But here's what I'll say, Ron. Think about the fact that Trayvon Walker was the first overall pick of the draft. Yeah. And everybody's talking about his numbers. Well, you know, man, it's easier to get to the bone when you're the biggest dog chasing it, right? If you played for Georgia, there was 11 of them out there, which is evident by 15 players from that school being drafted. And so I think Lewis Cine is going to be one of those players that actually has more production in the NFL than he did in college. And then if you watch him, and maybe it's the way I love the game to be played, like he's like a real life killer. You know, in a day and age where, you know, targeting is huge in college or in NFL, unnecessary roughness is huge. This is a dude that seeks and destroys. And I think that's still of high value in football and in the NFL. Obviously, you have to do it within the rules, but I think he can do that. And so he's an extremely confident player. He was a high school All-American, huge recruit, you know, played from the time he stepped foot at Georgia. You know how hard that is, Ron. And I think you got a true first-round safety, a true plug-and-play guy based on the type of things he had to be able to digest, right, and then regurgitate at Georgia. And I think it's a good pick for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, when you look at the draft as a whole, and so we're going to take a look at the trades. This is Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's first year, Kevin O'Connell's first year as head coach. I know personally the Ravens would never trade with the Steelers. Like, I don't think they would be able to do it, you know, mentally. I just think they would say, you know, screw this. Somebody else has to want to trade with us. But the Vikings did it twice. They traded with the Lions and then the Packers. And so a lot of fans were pissed off. You know, they didn't understand the purpose of helping the Packers out in the trade. You know, you see it on the media. Everybody's saying the Vikings got fleeced. I heard it this morning on the way into work. Same thing. Everybody on talk radio, the Vikings got fleeced. I watched ESPN. Everybody, you know, a lot of people are questioning that trade. In your opinion, because nobody's put pads on yet, do you see that as a big fail, or do you see that as possibly just a learning experience for Kwesi Adolfo?
You know, I think it's a learning experience, but we also have to realize, even if he does have the last say in the room, those rooms are about conversations. Yeah. Right. And so when you hire people who are experienced and you hire people who have gone through drafts before, they're a part of those conversations. And I think that those conversations are less about who you're helping and how you're helping your team. Yeah. Or how you are putting your team in the negative or hurting your team. And I guess after having those conversations, they felt like those trades helped them more in the future than the player that the Green Bay Packers or the Detroit Lions would pick. And now, I think that's more of a, at least in my opinion, that's more of a feelings thing, right? Yep. And businesses can't run off feelings. You see what I'm saying? Like, yeah, the fans say it, the, you know, talk radio says it. Yeah, because, you know, we get into feelings. The fans feel everything, but they ain't paying no money for nothing, right? They ain't paying no money for these players. They're not the people in the draft rooms trying to draft them. And then on talk radio, hell, we just need topics. It's a great topic. You know what I'm saying? Because it doesn't really truly have an answer. It's about subjectivity. And so, you know, I believe if it can help your class, you know, these are certain things that you do. If it can help your draft, if it can help your team. Watson from North Dakota State might be an amazing wide receiver. Mm-hmm. You know, he may turn out to be Jordy Nelson. Right now, he's not. And you also don't get on the phone with the Packers and go, well, are you going to move up to take a wide receiver? And if so, what wide receiver is that? Because it's the wide receiver that we want. We're not going to, you know, it's not how it works. And so they were going to find a way to move up anyway. Hopefully, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you use that to, you know, get everything you possibly wanted from this draft. And I think when when you get a guy like Andrew Booth, who, I felt, was a first round talent, where you do, that kind of equals out to me.
Yeah, and so looking at who they got, as they moved up, they moved back. Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, Ed Ingram out of your school, LSU, Brian Asamoah, everybody's going back and forth on that one, out of Oklahoma. And so they've added a lot of pieces, and then they got a guy to Missouri that I like in a Caleb Evans. Yeah, 6'2", long. Reminds me of like a Ike Taylor or like he has that kind of body, or even Xavier Rhodes, like he's long. Has high vertical, real good broad jump. And so when you look at a kid and top end speed, when you look at a kid like that, the Vikings can't say they won, but day one, everybody was giving the Vikings A's. Day two, everybody's giving the Vikings A's and B's. And then day three, overall, now they're saying D's and F's. Does that matter? Because I know you talked about topics, or is it when the pads come on, we never know what's really going to happen anyway?
It's so crazy. The bottom half of the draft is actually the hardest to evaluate.
Right.
Like you don't know, like when those guys fall to those positions, like you don't know. Something you mentioned that I think is something people have to pay a ton of attention to, right? When you're talking about a Caleb Evans, you mentioned the vertical, you mentioned the length, the explosiveness. When you start drafting at those parts of the draft, it's like, okay, I could go get this, 5'10" corner who played really good and was, all ACC, this and this, who's probably tapped out on what he's going to be. Or I could go get this physical freak that I can now teach certain things, that I can now allow to learn the game and progress mentally and use all of those skills, all of those measurables to the best of his ability. That's a draft to win in the fourth round. You know what I mean? That's what you're looking for in those positions. And if you look at Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth the way I do, you got 2 first rounders in the secondary this year.
Yeah.
Andrew Booth had the hernia surgery, I believe it was, in the offseason, wasn't able, to perform, wasn't able to go out there, but he's a 4'3" guy, right? 4'4" guy. He's a guy with an extremely high vertical. He's a dude, if anybody who's ever watched his film, has some of the best ball skills this side of Derek Stingley in this draft, which to me says he's the next best from ball awareness. He's the next best guy. And that doesn't mean that he's better than Sauce, but what I'm saying is the talent level there is so high. And so, to me, I believe you address some areas of need. And now if you want to be upset that, they traded some picks within a division, I guess you can do that and try to knock them from a draft standpoint. But I believe they have a draft that's giving them the ability to fill some holes this year and also down the line develop some of these players that were drafted late into starters. And I think that's a smart draft, in my opinion.
Yeah. And last one for you, Ryan. So players are going to, look at these type of interviews. They're going to, they watch ESPN too. It's a totally different era where it's on in the locker room. It's on in the weight room. I was over at the Vikings facility for the draft. Every TV had ESPN or Fox or somebody going.
Something more, yeah.
So, and the players are just, they're eating a salad in the lunchroom. It's on. And so if you could give advice to a player and say, hey, I'm on ESPN, I won Super Bowls, I played, but this is what you should also be doing during the season if you want to look at your post-career. What would you tell them to be doing heading, into these next 4 to 8 years of their life?
Yeah, what's so crazy, man, is for the first 4 or 8 years, all I really did was football. To be honest, football has opened up doors for me that I know wouldn't be open if I didn't play for 13 years. I don't necessarily, I'm not on ESPN without being a Pittsburgh Steeler, right? Because it was an opportunity to be on a team that won championships or that was contending for championships year in and year out and be a good player on that team. And so the first thing I would say is focus on your craft. Absolutely. When the season is in, that's what you should be focused on. You shouldn't be focused on what your money is doing. You should hire somebody to do that for you. You shouldn't be focused on what's going on outside of your family and your loved ones, because that's not your business at those times. Now, in the off season, it was about in your off season. It's about learning, right? It's about understanding. Off season, I would go to ESPN and eventually became an intern at ESPN, which led me to my job there. I would work at training facilities and try to learn, different techniques and different ways of programming, which led me to owning my own facility now. And so in the off season, I think that's the time where you start to look at things you may like to do or options you can have off of the field once your playing days are over. But football's first, Ron. I'm just going to be honest with you, man. After your faith, after your family, the only thing that you should be concerned with is football. My wife has this saying, which I found endearing during my career. And now I know it was her just being kind of pissed off with me. She said, she would always say, that's bad, bro. She would always say, Ryan did football and I did everything else. And at the time, I was like, yeah, that's right, baby. Like, I do football. I work out hard, I train, this and this. Then I realized then I realized for her, it was, when he had to stay after and do treatment, or he had to stay after and watch video, I lugged around 3 kids. When it was in the off season, I had to go train. She helped me pack the house up and we went to Arizona to train. She made sure that everybody was back and ready for school when I was in training camp. And I think the good part about that is I was 100% focused on my craft. And I was able to get every ounce out of this, at the time, 105'11", 192-pound, undrafted free agent body. Right, I played 13 years. I retired in November because I knew I couldn't do it anymore. But then you miss out on some things too, and so it's going to be some give and take in it, man. But focus on your craft first. Continue to expand your boundaries. Continue to push the envelope of who you are as a human. Be good to people, because as you know now, Ron, a lot of those people that walk through those locker rooms, a lot of those producers you see, a lot of those businesses, that love you while you're playing, they don't really love you as much when you're not, but they will remember the way you treated them. They will remember the way you were when you got an opportunity to meet them. And, the final thing is, man, every day's an interview. Whether you're on the field or off, somebody's always watching, and they're always going to remember how you made them feel.
Well, yeah, man, I want to thank you for joining me on the Ron Johnson Show. Ryan Clark, I'm proud of you, man. Like, you're
Appreciate
doing it
bro.
as a black man, as a father, everything, man. Like, I never see anything negative about you in the media besides Twitter. Like, for some reason, you piss people off when you get on ESPN.
Hey, I'm not everybody's favorite most of the time on the Twitter, but you know what? Twitter ain't real life.
Hey, I got your back though, man. So no, appreciate you joining me. That's Ryan Clark. Up next, we got the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes. We'll be back after this. Do you want smart post-game reaction from insiders that cover your favorite teams? Check out our Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Get instant reactions from our Locked On team hosts, along with prominent reporters like Kevin Gorg for the Wild, Brandon Warren for the Twins, and Chalenga Langason for the Timberwolves. No fluff, just 10 minutes of straight analysis after each game. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube and never miss a podcast. Well, like I promised, the time is now. It's the Daily 3. That's 3 questions, 3 minutes. Take it away, Sam.
All right, we got to talk about the Timberwolves, who lose another fourth quarter lead on Friday. They lose the series in 6 games. The season is over for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, Ron, what is your lasting impression of this playoff series that the Wolves lose 4-2 to the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yeah, the one word that's in my mind is unfinished business. I think that should be their mantra going into the offseason and then starting next season. They didn't finish the job. You know, if they were hitmen, I wouldn't pay them because the body's not dead. Like, they basically shot a couple warning shots. Like, I'm putting this in Hitman terms. Why? Because I love the movie Hitman. I love those kind of movies. Fired a couple warning shots. Maybe threw a smoke grenade into the apartment. But then they fell in love. Like, if you've seen the movie Hitman, he actually falls in love with like his target and a possible target of other hitmen. And that's a no-no. Hitmen don't have feelings. Like, you can't fall in love. And I say that because I feel like they fell in love with the moment. Like, they fell in love with the stuff. They fell in love with being in the playoffs, celebrating that 7th game, play-in game win, that 7th seed play-in game win. I feel like they fell in love with the Ja Morant, T. Morant, Karl-Anthony Towns daddy's story, the Ja Morant, Karl-Anthony Towns, friendship, the Usher, T. Morant look-alike. I mean, they fell in love with the moment. And then I feel like, some of the comments being made, like Karl-Anthony Towns, oh, we're home now. Like, they gotta deal with us at home now. And then you lose. And then T. Morant or Ja Morant can make fun of you. Like, it felt like every time, they grittied after one of the games. And then what does T. or Ja Morant do? He gritties after they knock him out. Like, it was just too much of trying to be, these sound bites, these like wannabe persona gangster. Like, be what you are, be a team. I look back at like team wins that won championships that you're really like, who? Like, who? Like the Raptors. There wasn't like a moment or a guy other than Drake, the rapper, like loaning them his plane so they can fly to games. And like, there wasn't really a guy, there was no LeBron, Kyrie on that Raptors team. It was just a team. They went out there and played. They had big moments. Kawhi, showed up and hero balled them into the Sixers win with the late heroics. But I just feel like that's my lasting impression, that being up 20, being up 10 with 4 minutes to go, not utilizing timeouts when teams are going on 8-0 runs and just not being able to do it. Like my daughter's volleyball team, same thing this weekend. Final set of the not championship. We were in the second place game. Champion was already crowned because they had beaten everybody. So now the game we were playing, it was for second place, but they were up in the final set, like, I don't know, 8-1. My daughter had rattled off, like, and she's only 11, but she can already jump serve. She had rattled off 7 great jump serves and was just dinging them, aces and everything. I actually posted a couple of those on my Instagram. That's 3 RonJohnson on Instagram if you want to check it out. But their coach, the other team, calls a timeout. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Girls come out. They go on a 4-0 run. Our coach doesn't call a timeout. And that's where I'm like, you know what? The minute they went on a 4-0 run, just call a timeout quick. Like, just get the girls back and say, hey, we're up 8-4. All you got to do is get a side out, and we're going to put the pressure back on them. Ends up being, I want to say, 12-12, and then 14-12. And then our best server comes up, and we just can't get it done. Or one of our better servers comes up. Because, of course, I'm going to say my daughter's the best because she can jump serve. But, yeah, and so I thought about that. That's the lasting impression. I told my daughter that. I'm like, remember that feeling and take it, because now we're in softball season. I'm like, take it in the softball season. Take that feeling of like having the lead or not doing what you're supposed to do the entire game, because one lackadaisical point turned into 4. Momentum is key in all sports. And I think that's what I remember. I remember not being able to get it closed out.
Yeah, the narrative was that the Wolves had really won 4 of the 5 games. They'd been the better team. They led for most of the time. Well, when you blow 3 leads in the fourth quarter, that is a developed skill that the Wolves have not learned. And that means that they were not the better team. If that happens over and over and over again, it's not an anomaly. That's part of their makeup, is that they just don't know how to finish games. So you can't say that you were the better team in that series when you lose those leads late. The Minnesota Wild begin their playoff push tonight, 8:30 Central Time against the Blues at XL Energy Center. So, Ron, I want your series prediction. Who wins the series and in how many games?
I'm not well versed on the Wild, I'd say. I'm a casual, as people would call me. I can watch it. I will watch playoffs because I know it's fun. It's a lot more exciting in the playoffs. The intensity's up. That's any sport. The playoffs makes it just like, that's why I love the softball College World Series. It's the intensity it's up. Girls are going at it. I'm going to say Wild. They get 2 at home. They got 2 on the road. And then they have to come home, and then they go on the road and they're home. I'm going to say Wild in 6. I think they can probably get it done in 5, maybe, but I'm gonna say Wild in 6. Why? Because it's sports. The Blues, like the difference in hockey now, after I look at it too, it's not like one plays 8. You have to play somebody, the one team in your division. I don't really like how hockey, after I like researched it a little bit, I don't like that. Like, why am I playing a really good team to start off? And I guess all the teams, because everybody's doing that. And then the one team gets it because the top team gets a bye, right? Is that how it works?
The top team plays one of the 2 wild cards.
The wild cards. Okay.
The wild cards are so top 3 from each division, and then the next 2 best are the wild cards.
Got it. And so, right. So now they're going to play one of the wild cards in this. And so 1 plays a wild card, 2 plays 3, basically. I guess it makes it better the way they split up all these divisions like that and so many different ones. I just think that's tough. Like, it's tough to do it. So it's anybody's game. It's not like one team's dominant. Like, they both are fighting for home ice at the very end. So it's even more intense. But I'll give it. I mean, home ice, I'll give it to them. Like, anytime you got your fans helping you out, I'll give it to the Wild. Wild in 5. Wild in 6.
I'm gonna go Wild in 5.
Okay.
I think they win all the home games in this series. They get 1 on the road, and St. Louis is good, but I don't know who's stopping the Wild right now. The way they're playing, this feels like a team that could go the distance. I know I'm jinxing it. They're probably gonna get a limit swept now, but this feels like a team that has that capability. Ron, I got to get your take on the Gophers that were drafted. We touched on Esteza Yotamewo, but I want to hear, Boye Mafe, O'Keefe, Daniel Fa'alele, all got drafted over the weekend as well. So who do you think is going to have the brightest NFL future?
That's hard. I can't do that one. I'm going to say, this is what I will say. I think Boye going to a deficient team like the Seahawks, who traded away their world with the Broncos and let Russell Wilson go. They've just not been the Legion of Boom anymore. Kind of starting from scratch. I'll say Boye Mafe in that stadium and in that crowd, the type of style defense they play, where it's loose and wild and they like to get after the quarterback, as we've seen when they play the Vikings. I'm going to say Boye. I'm not going to say longer, but I'm just going to say he's going to have a pretty solid career. Daniel Fa'alele, I did a Ravens interview about that because he's a Gopher and to the Ravens, and same with me. And so I did the same thing last year with Rashad Bateman. So they called me again about doing Daniel Fa'alele. And I think athletically, like the way that team plays, it's going to be a question mark because it's not a sit in the pocket QB. It's a different style offense. So it'll be interesting to see how he does there. But the one surprise I will say, if he had more time, I would say O'Keefe. And I mean time, not in him, but in Tom Brady. If he had more time with Tom Brady, I would say O'Keefe. Why? Because Tom Brady loves tight ends. He loves them. I mean, turn Gronk into an absolute, like, I look at draft comparisons of Gronk when he came out of Arizona, and people were saying, like, oh, that's a dumb pick. Like, I don't see it. I don't see him having a long career, blah, blah. Look at him. And Gronk, I love Gronk because somebody tweeted that out, that draft, whatever deal, after the pick was made. And he was just like, and he tagged it. I mean, Gronk tweeted at the guy who did it too. He's like, hey, what do you think now? So I love that because I know Gronk was seriously sitting there probably having a beer with his brothers and just like, hey, man, look at this idiot. Let's tweet to him, and then he tweets to the guy. And I didn't see if the guy ever responded back, but I love that kind of stuff. And so when I think about O'Keefe with Tom Brady is smart, man. Like, he can make, I mean, he got Tyler Johnson some early touchdowns, had some great plays with Tyler Johnson. So, O'Keefe's going to a team when you know people, Antoine Winfield now, Tyler Johnson. Those are your teammates. Like, it's going to be so much more comfortable for him. But when you look at him as a blocker in the backfield, he's bigger than people know. He's 6'5". Like, he's a tall kid. He looks like a fullback, but he's tall. So I think the Bucs can turn him into a nice NFL player. But that'll do it for the Ron Johnson Show. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Please go back and watch, if you have not, the Ryan Clark interview. It was probably one of the best I've had all year. Ryan Clark gave us a lot of great info. We touched on the Vikings draft picks. You tell us your grade. Tweet to us, Instagram, whatever you want to do. Comment. Tell us your grade for the Vikings draft class. But make sure you download and subscribe on YouTube to Locked On Sports Minnesota and find the Ron Johnson Show as well. And also, you can download and take us anywhere, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. Have a great day.